Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I've found the debate this evening very interesting, quite fascinating, and a lot of it has revolved around the question of whether it would have been appropriate to continue to make contributions to the superannuation fund during a period when the government was borrowing in order to carry out a range of activities, actually. I love the way the National Party tries to sort of reduce this down to borrowing in order to put money into the superannuation fund. The government has borrowed to an astonishing level, actually, to levels that no other government ever has before, but in order to do a range of things. And one of the things that the government did, one of the things that the government borrowed to do was to provide tax cuts. Now, there's really good arguments why you don't provide tax cuts, especially tax cuts to the wealthy. There might have been an argument for it during a period of recession and then this very slow period of growth after the global financial crisis. There may have been an argument for tax cuts if the majority of the money returned to the citizens of New Zealand had gone to those with the least. Because those with the least have to go out and spend that money because they're struggling to make ends meet as it is, and that would actually have provided the economic stimulus that was the argument the government made for providing tax cuts while it was borrowing heavily just in order to keep the ship afloat. But no, they did what national governments do. They were true to form, and they gave tax cuts to the most wealthy, which was wonderful for the people who were most wealthy, but did very little to stimulate the economy. So, sir, during that period of time, it may well have been prudent, and in fact, looking back, it would have been incredibly prudent to carry on contributing to the superannuation fund during that period. But actually, the point I want to make is this, and that it is that achieving surpluses is actually incredibly important for the government, because if you are in surplus, you remove that debate. It's actually a really simple decision to make. If you're in surplus, making a contribution, what the size of the contribution might be a question for debate, but making a contribution to a superannuation fund then is an easy choice to make. I accept that it's a more difficult choice to make when you're having to borrow for a range of things, but if you're in surplus, it's an easy choice to make, and that's why achieving surplus is important. Alistair Scott's nodding away. Prime Minister's not so sure about whether achieving surplus is quite so important. It was important. It was a very important election promise, but now not quite so important. It's like landing a jumbo jet on a pinhead or something, and really whether you make it to surplus or not really isn't that important. Well, sir, it is relevant to this bill, because what we're talking about is actually saving for New Zealand's future, putting contributions into the superannuation fund in order to ensure that universal superannuation is actually available for future generations. Because that's actually one of the great issues facing this nation at the moment, and should be facing that government. How do we make sure that universal superannuation remains available not just today, not just in 10 years' time, but in 20 years' time, 30 years' time, 40 years' time? How do we ensure that it is still available? In the face of an ageing population, in the face of a growing number of superannuitants in comparison to the working population, in the face of all those challenges, what do we have to do to ensure that universal superannuation is still available? And that's why the Cullen Fund, no, not Keep National actually, the exact opposite of Keep National, because if the National Party had been in government in 2002, there would be no Cullen Fund. There would be no Cullen Fund, because they're obsessed with hindsight and they've got absolutely no foresight. That's classic National Party thinking, always thinking about the past, never thinking about the future. So actually, if you want to ensure that New Zealanders in the future will be able to rely on universal superannuation, what we need more than ever now is a Labour-led government, a government that can actually look into the future, a government that actually believes in sovereign wealth funds, believes in putting money aside now to save for the future, because that's not what the National Party wanted to do, not what the National Party wanted to do at all. They wanted to blow it all on tax cuts for their mates here and now, not worrying about the future. They've gone quiet now because they know I'm right. Mr. Speaker, this is an important piece of legislation because it will help make the superannuation fund more effective, and that's why we're proud to support it, sir.
I move that the question be now put.